what I started noticing after this debacle in the Senate took place is that if I were to become incapacitated or in some way couldn't serve, that it's not clear who would be the next acting governor. There are 2, if not 3 senators that lay claim to that post. When there is no president pro tem of the Senate, or the president pro tem of the Senate leaves the state at the same time the governor does, then at that point the Speaker, Sheldon Silver, acts as governor. But it would be hard for the Speaker to lay claim, since 2 presiding officers, or at least 2 of the Senate, are. So what I was, so that's when I started researching and started thinking about who would actually serve if necessary. Had the Senate solved their dilemma in that time, being about the last 2.5 weeks or so, this would not have necessarily been an action that I would have taken. But realizing now that even if they solve the dilemma, that the body is so fragile, with senators jumping back and forth from one side to the other, no tennis balls at Wimbledon moved as quickly as some of these senators changed their seats on either side of the aisle, that we basically have an unstable Senate. Even if they come to a decision, a vacancy in the Senate can change the leadership in a heartbeat, and clearly this body has shown that they don't seem to adjust, as other legislative bodies have, to a tie. So I thought that the best public policy was to go out and find the best person that I could think of who could govern in my absence, and that person is Richard Ravitch. The issue of succession, to me, is the primary issue here. That is the most important of all the issues, and it standing alone, as far as I'm concerned, is an issue. So I think...
Doesn't this just ensure many months, possibly, of litigation?
No, I don't think so. I think that the courts can respond with speed. And listen, if the Senate can come to a power-sharing agreement, that does not in any way inhibit the role of the lieutenant governor. That can be discharged in the courts, hopefully quickly. But let's look at even if a lieutenant governor broke a tie for procedure in the Senate, the fact is that these parties are tied 31-31. The lieutenant governor cannot cast a vote on substantive issues. So they have got to come to a power-sharing agreement. And they have got to go in and pass these emergency pieces of legislation. They can do that today. There's 62 of them. Go in the chamber. Let anybody be the presiding officer. It doesn't matter. And call the bills up, pass them. Both sides have tried to pass bills and haven't been able to, because the other side doesn't come to the Senate. Now, this is childish. The issue of how this exacerbates their problem, it doesn't at all. If they come to a power-sharing agreement, they announce it, they would now have rotating presiding officers. They would now have rotating presidents of the Senate. They would rotate. Now, again, if the governor became incapacitated, you can have rotating presidents of the Senate, because that's a legislative body, but you can't have rotating co-acting governors. I don't even think there's a term. What you now have is chaos. You have administrative decisions presumably being reversed from week to week. It's not an executive office is not the kind of office that can be shared by 2 people. And so what I'm saying is, that's why I go back to the issue of succession. That is the most important here. Now, what can the lieutenant governor do in the Senate? The lieutenant governor could break a tie and then create a president of the Senate if necessary, but that president would never be able to pass any bills because they need the other side. They only have 31 votes. So what we believe is that in the end, they've got to get a power-sharing agreement that shares resources, that allows both sides to put important and controversial legislation on the floor. And if they say that they're close to it, nothing about Richard Ravitch or David Paterson should get in their way. But as you have noticed, any excuse not to act or come up with agreement has been invoked by the Senate. First, they said the governor can't. Remember, they were big on this point. The governor can't bring the Senate in without the Assembly. They lost in court. The governor doesn't have a right to convene these sessions. They lost in court. And then it's the governor didn't bring the bills on time, they said one day. The bills got there. Did they pass them? No. They still talk about the bills not being there. It had nothing to do with their inaction. So now if they'd like some new excuses, Ravitch, David Paterson, from one day to the next, the Senate has befuddled us and confused us with, I think, the politics of deception. Where we need to place our focus on right now is why can't these 62 men and women go in the Senate chamber, lay down their arguments, put down their excuses, lay down their weapons, and pass these vital pieces of legislation that counties and cities with Republican and Democrats as mayor and county executive are screaming about how they're being hurt, and somehow the Senate doesn't act. And they've got, as they see it, a whole new thing to distract us, the appointment of a lieutenant governor, which primary function is for succession, but theoretically could serve as the neutral presiding officer and could break a tie for procedural matters in the Senate. In the end, this is the Senate's duty. If they say they're close, I'm going to come back here next week assuming that we'll have a power-sharing agreement. If I come back here and it's not, then all of you, particularly in the media, have been duped again, because they have, again, sold you a bunch of empty promises and hollow intentions. If they have a power-sharing agreement, and they certainly were closer than they were a few weeks ago, then let's sign one.